Hello and welcome to the Gaggle War Challenge. And if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, last week, to no one's surprise, the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, which is the federal office for the protection of the Constitution, which is
a nasty name that does nasty business.
Exactly, it's the German equivalent of the FBI. Declared the Alternativ für Deutschland party a confirmed right-wing extremist organization, which means that it is now entitled to spy on the AfD, infiltrated with secret agents, surveil whatever needs to be surveilled, and clearly it's a step towards the ultimate banning of this party, which came in second in February's federal elections in Germany and is now, in at least some polls, ahead of the Christian Democrats. So this is quite a major development. And, unfortunately, it brings back memories of a kind of a very authoritarian German past. Of course, the Germans now try to defend what they're doing in terms of, because of
it.
Yes, exactly. So, but the point is that when you're closing parties down, when you're sending secret police agents against your political opponents, it doesn't matter what your cause is, whether you're doing it on behalf of fascism or anti-fascism. You're basically repressing your political opposition. So here's the announcement.
Well, hang on, just before we go there. I mean, instead of enlisting, and this is obviously the establishment parties are enlisting the help of Germany's version of the FBI, a more noble response, or maybe the only noble response from the intelligence community is to say to the Christian Democrats, why don't you make a better argument?
Exactly. And that is the point, to make the better argument. But that really isn't what happens in Europe today, because in today's Europe, it's really about cracking down, repressing, banning. So it's either because you're supposedly working for Russia, you're working for the Kremlin, even though they never present any evidence that what you're doing anything on behalf of the Kremlin, or you're somehow right-wing, preferably you're both. And the AfD, they accuse them of both. You never know which one it is. One minute you're a right-wing extremist, another minute you're working for Putin. But that's the temperament of today's Europe. We had Ursula von der Leyen, who openly boasts that Europe intends to ban views that Europe just deems inappropriate. When she talked about we must get beyond debunking and move towards pre-bunking.
Yeah, it's as if Europe is some kind of tangible entity. It's like, George, we should check with Europe.
That's right.
What's Europe's position here?
Right.
Europe is a collective of very diverse groups of people and languages and cultures and traditions. Okay. Right. There is no such thing as Europe beyond maybe geographic.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But we're told the opposite.
Right.
That these are real, tangible things. They're not.
Right. Well, of course, but by having created these authoritarian bureaucratic structures, they can use those structures to threaten any European that falls out of line. So, for instance, the May the 9th, we're coming up to the 80th anniversary of the victory in World War II, and Europe, the leaders of Europe, Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, threatened any EU state that intended to send any representatives to Moscow to commemorate the victory in World War II. And it's more or less worked. I mean, as far as the EU is concerned, only Robert Fico of Slovakia is going. So he alone. But even Orban, no one from the Hungarian government will go to Moscow.
Well, it's interesting, the g- boycotting and besmirching the victory over fascism. At the time, it was the Soviet Union. The successor state is now the Russian Federation. They were the victors. Well, that is something that they should have been able to come to terms with after 80 years,
Right,
okay? And so much that has happened in between. But also, George, it is a confirmation of who the losers are in that conflict,
right,
okay? And is that something they regret now? I thought the Second World War was one of the greatest learning moments in
right,
human history.
right.
Apparently not anymore.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. They're always talking about it, always talking about, the threat from like as we're discussing here, the threat from the far right, the threat from the Nazis, threat from fascists. And then, well, here was it. This was the victory, this great moment of a victory. Why aren't you there celebrating this? That's all you're celebrating. No one's asking you to celebrate today's Russia or anything else. All you're doing is to celebrate what happened in 1945, and
Yes, and
they cannot do it.
and to refine it, yeah, absolutely. Coming to Moscow on May 8th is not to celebrate Vladimir Putin, to
Right,
celebrate the Russian Federation. It is to celebrate the and commemorate the victory over the scourge of fascism.
right,
And you can we've heard all the revisionist arguments here, and I gave you one specific example a few weeks ago in the country that you currently reside. The Red Army bled 600,000 lives in Hungary alone.
right, right.
Okay, and the Hungarian leadership cannot say, or at least
Right,
acknowledge. Again, yeah, I'm not telling people to raise their glass,
right,
okay, but acknowledge
right, right,
that sacrifice on the part of the Soviet Union and the peoples of the Soviet Union.
right. Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. That's throughout um, Eastern Europe. You're talking about the Baltic states. You're talking about Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all of them, and of course Germany itself. All of them were liberated by the Red Army. Yugoslavia was liberated by the Red Army, but as far as at this moment, only the president of Serbia, Alexander Vucic, will be showing up in Moscow. But Yugoslavia, the entirety of Yugoslavia, most of whom is now inside the EU, should all be attending the celebrations in Moscow.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I've always found, the George and I have talked endlessly about the European Union, but it is kind of from a historical perspective, George. It's very interesting is that with the end of the Cold War, and we have to understand that the Cold War was the result of the how the Second World War was ended or not ended. That's another long topic. But for me, and I lived in Eastern Europe in the 1980s, the fascist past of the Eastern European countries was kind of put into a deep freeze.
right,
Oh, because they're captive nations
right,
now. Okay, all right. Well, why do you call yourself captive? Because your Nazis and your fascists were expunged. Okay, that's how you ended up on that side. Remember that. Okay, and so now again, with this revisionist approach to the Second World War and its outcome, this is another whitewashing.
right,
Well, let's talk about Croatia. What was going on in Croatia
right,
during the war?
right, right,
Okay,
right.
and why did the Soviet Union liberate Croatia? Oh, because you had a Nazi problem?
That's right.
Again, this all whitewashing it.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. And to be fair, the communists also essentially said, "Okay, you're on the right side," and they put a kind of a blanket on too much exploration of what happened before the war and what happened during the war. So, for instance, in Yugoslavia, the whole fascist state of Croatia, that was just simply buried.
Yep.
Yeah, hey, everybody's on the right side now, and so there was no one really went into all the horrific atrocities that were perpetrated by the fascist Croatian regime. So in a way, everyone did well out of the Cold War. So hey, well, we'll just put we'll put a line underneath us, and that's it. We won't talk about it. We'll just talk about the what's happening today.
And also, it's something that isn't really talked about enough. I think maybe you and I are the only ones that have talked about this, but what's happening right now is very, very unsettling for European elites, Western elites in general, because the now the outcome of the Second World War is put into question. This is something George and I've talked about. It's been going on for 25 years now, because this equivalence of Nazis and and communism. Okay, we even saw that on the pages of the New
Right.
York Review of Books. Remember,
Hmm.
and and now there's not only is that up for discussion,
Right.
which I think is settled history personally, but now the end of the Cold War is
Right.
now on the front burner because it was supposed to be the end of history,
Right.
the victory of Western liberalism. Well, Ukraine is telling us something completely different. Russia wasn't vanquished. It is a returning to its natural state in European and world affairs. That wasn't supposed to be the outcome of the Cold War, George.
Right. No, that's right. But I think that the attempt to defeat, downgrade, destroy Russia, you can say, well, that's a long-term project that was put
And
in abeyance, and has now been revived,
yeah,
because that was clearly the policy during the Biden years. There was NATO policy, there was Biden policy, which is we use this war in Ukraine to just destroy Russia. And that, and you say, well, that's kind of the Hitlerian project to a certain extent. That's the Wilhelmine Germany project even before that, of the British, British Empire. So that's a long-term project, essentially, of removing all trace of Russia from Europe, push Russia as far east as possible, and then we don't, and then give Russia problems after that. So that's a long-term project, which somehow was put in abeyance for a while, but then was, revived, especially in Ukraine.
Essentially, what you can say, since we're talking about history, the entire Ukraine project was Barbarossa 2.0.
Right, right. No, that's, I think, right, because there was never any reason to bring Ukraine into NATO other than to provoke Russia. And that was clearly a calculated step. It was known right from the start that this was a problem. This was known 1991, 1992, 1993. This would be a problem. And yet, the Americans in particular, but NATO pushed and pushed and pushed for it because the goal was always to use Ukraine to destroy Russia. Um, so here, this is the notice from the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, and then as of today, the Office of the Protection of the Constitution classifies Alternative for Deutschland as a confirmed right-wing extremist endeavor due to the extremist nature of the entire party, which disregards human dignity. So,
Well, Joe, just a little bit about chronology here. Um, is it a coincidence this is after the snap elections and its result? Is it a coincidence that as the new government is being organized,
right,
very unpopular even
right,
before they take power,
that's right, that's right,
and public opinion polls
right,
are telling them a reality on the ground? Is there any
that's right.
kind of
Yeah,
timing here?
it's entirely coincidental. Entirely, there was no connection whatever. For the interesting thing is that this Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz works for Nancy Fraser, who is the Minister of the Interior. She's a real extremist. She's a social democrat. The social democrat have just got the worst pounding in their history. This is they're at the lowest ebb through this famous
And
party.
everyone, it's one of the oldest political parties in Europe.
One of the oldest. Oldest,
Yes.
they create the social democracy.
Yes.
So it's going all the way back to Karl Marx and Kautsky and Bernstein, all these.
Bismarck.
Exactly, exactly. Bismarck, who outlawed the social democrats.
Exactly.
he may have been onto something, but that's a different.
Hold that thought.
Hold
Okay.
that thought, yes. But here, she's an outgoing minister, and her party just got humiliated, and then this is what you come up with on your way out the door. And then this is what's so peculiar. When you read the sentence, it says, which disregards human dignity. What the hell does that mean?
Where's that in the law?
Exactly. Well, yeah, what do you mean you disregard human dignity? I mean, and exactly where's that in the law? I mean, presumably
Oh,
it's
oh,
not against the
I'm
law to disregard human dignity.
we need Hans right now because is human dignity a legal term?
Exactly. It means nothing. It's when you use a word like this, it's just a phrase that sounds good, but has
Well, I'm
no
sorry.
no
I'm
legal.
sorry. I don't want to go too far in sarcasm, but I mean, isn't that a matter of taste?
I would have thought. I would have thought. And then talks about these court, the Cologne administrative court, blah blah, confirmed the classification of the party as a suspected case in judgments in 2022, 2024, because there were numerous indications of efforts by the AfD to undermine the free democratic basic order. These indications were confirmed during further investigation and in significant parts consolidated into certainty. So they're undermining the free democratic order. They've just done well in an election. You've done very badly in an election, and now you're moving to suppress the people who have done well in the election, and you're doing it on the basis of a democratic order. This is the kind of surreal world of these people.
Okay, well, a free democratic basic order. I'm sorry, for me, that's word salad.
It is a
Okay.
word salad. Yeah.
Okay, but so, George, my gut tells me, and we're only in the second paragraph. We're on the second paragraph. Um, they went snooping around looking for something. They didn't discover
Right,
anything.
exactly.
They were looking for
Right.
something.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And they've done this as a 1,200-page report. When you need 1,200 pages to prove something, it sounds like you haven't got much of a case. I mean, that's still you always. I mean, you should be able to prove this pretty quickly. You don't need 1,200-page report on this.
And and you know what? At the end of the day, it's part of the Western tradition. Political speech can be really ugly.
Yeah.
That's that's part of the tradition, okay? And how to deal with ugly political discourse is to come up with better discourse. That's
Exactly.
how it works, okay?
Right. Right. That is how it's supposed to work. And the Germans, all these years, they pretended that they understood this. Yes, yes, we've understood. We've learned our lesson. They haven't learned anything. Just because
Everybody, George and I have been, for our entire lives, conscious lives, we've been following this. This is something that isn't new. But George just, hit the nail on the head. With this kind of judgment, the mask has fallen off.
right.
And I'll tell you, George, there are times that I've tried to be very supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like
Right.
there is a learning process, and we can
Right.
learn from their experience. I regret saying these things now. I
I,
totally.
I agree, and I felt the same way because at the time of the reunification in October 1990, I was among those who said, "Yeah, look, stop going on about what happened to the war. They've done their bit. They've shown themselves to be different. There's no reason at all to be to prevent this from happening. They want it, let them have it." And then just a few months later, then they moved into Yugoslavia and just recognized the independence of Croatia and Slovenia when they were told not to do so. United Nations had told them, don't do it. You're just going to provoke a civil war. And they went ahead and did it after having made all these commitments and all these promises. And, that kind of made me pause, think maybe we're just a little bit too quick to think that, this is a new Germany and they're not doing any of the things that they used to do. So here they are. This is at the same time as this incoming German chancellor is promising massive rearmament and promising to send these Taurus missiles to Ukraine. I mean, maybe these are all coincidences, but hey, this, you
No,
see,
well, I mean, so meet the new boss, same as the old boss,
right,
because we have an activist foreign policy, we have a repressive domestic policy. Maybe everyone, this is the genetic code of German politics
right,
because there's evidence for this
right,
now.
right, exactly. And then it goes on. The Bundesamt reached this conclusion after an intensive and comprehensive expert review. Who's the experts? You always know when you're about to read BS is when they tell us it's the experts. So yeah, the experts have looked.
Yeah,
Who
I
are
mean,
these
why can't you
experts?
say intensive and comprehensive review?
Yes, exactly. Oh, the expert. Who are these experts? What are they experts in? Following its statutory mandate, the BFV was required to assess the party's actions against the central fundamental principles of the Constitution: human dignity, the principle of democracy, and the rule of law. In addition to the Federal Party's platform and statements, the review particularly examined the statements and other behavior of its representatives, as well as their connections to right-wing extremist actors and groups. Now, all the time
As
you're waiting. All right, did anyone A, advocate for violence? Did anyone perpetrate violence? I mean, that's a usual one. I mean, not what their view on human dignity is, but that's the usual measure of whether we should take any action against anybody. Were they involved in any kind of violence?
right-wing extremist actors. Oh, meaning people you don't like.
Meaning people you don't like. Exactly. That's what it is. And it says, after all of this, the following was established. Oh, the following was that. The party's prevailing understanding.
Don't you love the passive voice?
Yes, exactly.
After all this,
Was
the
established.
following was
It
established.
was
By
established
whom?
because
By whom?
the experts, whoever they may be. The party's prevailing understanding of the people based on ethnicity and descent is incompatible with the free democratic basic order. Well, right away, that's a matter of opinion. Again, you can agree, you can disagree, even if that is their view. And I'm not sure that is their view. That's not the view that the leaders of the AfD, this Alice Weidel, that's not the view she espoused. But even if it was the view that it was the view she espoused, that's a matter of opinion. I mean, some people think that a nation is based on ethnicity. Others say, hey, well, if anybody can be a member of the nation, they can whenever they arrive. Either way, it's a matter for debate. You can't just say, well, one is to be outlawed and one is to be accepted.
Well, I mean, in the United States, you have this latent nativist sentiment. My ancestors came on the
Right,
Mayflower
right.
and all of that. Is that wrong? Well,
But
it may be factually true. Is it right? Well, it's a matter of
it's a
taste.
matter of exactly. It's a matter of place. I mean, some people think, yeah, that a nation has to be defined by essentially there's a common ethnic root for a nation, and not anybody who. And others say no. I mean, you can just come in, stay. You've lived there 5 years, you get citizenship, and now you're a member. So, I mean, you can debate it. It's an interesting debate to have. But to say, well, one is absolutely incompatible with the Constitution, and therefore that should be in some ways outlawed, persecuted, or outlawed, or whatever. That's pretty undemocratic, should we say? It aims to exclude certain population groups from equal participation in society, subject them to unconstitutional discrimination, and thus assign them a legally devalued status. How do they do this? This party is not in power. It's never been about, it's not in power at the federal level, it's not in power in any state, local level. So how are they discriminating against anybody since they're not in any position to discriminate against anybody?
Oh, okay. Well, let's just say what's really in play right here. Okay, let's be honest because this document isn't.
Right.
This document is so manipulative. Yeah, a lot of people in the AfD don't like uncontrolled immigration. Yeah,
Right.
sorry, that's what it's about.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, is
That-
is that a new message
right.
you ever heard in Western publics?
Right.
And it's all over the place.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so I mean, and a party that is not in power.
Right. That's right.
How is it influencing the laws
That's right.
of the land?
That's
It's
right.
not.
Exactly. It's not in power. So it cannot do any of these things. This is entirely a theoretical construct. Oh, they believe in discrimination. Well, what does it matter what anybody, one person believes or
Look,
doesn't believe? They're not in any position to
George
discriminate
may
against
think that
anyone.
sherbet is better than ice cream.
Right.
I think he is totally wrong, but he
Right.
has a right to have that opinion.
That's right. But in the interesting again is the immigration because it was Angela Merkel with her fateful, insane decision in 2015 to welcome. We still don't know exactly why she did that when she kind of said, "Hey, you're all welcome to come in." That's what led to the rise of the AfD. It was not a significant political movement before 2015.
Well,
Uh,
what actually, George brings up a really good question. What the hell happened to that woman? Because she's from the East.
she's from the East, yeah.
I mean, didn't she, did she cut off any kind of a connection to her upbringing?
Right.
Is that, uh-oh, we open the gates here. I know a lot of people where I came from, they're not going to like it very much. I mean, is this again elite capture, ideology?
It's a very good question. There hasn't been any real assessment of the Merkel years. I mean, she was chancellor for many, many years, but there's all of the things, well, not just this, but why she didn't stand up to George W. Bush in 2008 over the whole issue of Ukraine. She could have absolutely put an end to that idea. She
She
didn't.
could have she could have stood up and shouted on the top of her lungs saying, "We are not going to recognize the coup government in Kiev."
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And all the years when she could have pushed for observation of Minsk to make sure that Minsk was observed, she didn't do any of that. And yeah, what happened with the coup is that's on her. That was on her. She was one of the guarantors of that deal in February 2014 and she didn't do a thing to. So that's a really good question. Elite capture or what? What was it with her? And why did she? Why was she leader for so long? I mean, was she that good?
Well,
I don't
no,
remember her being that good, but she was.
it seems to me, and maybe this is the reason to study her chancellorship, is how did Europe become such a mediocre
Right,
political polity?
right,
Because she's the exemplar
right,
of that mediocrity.
right. Yeah, she is. Very much so. Um, So subject them to unconstitutional discrimination, thus assign them a legally devalued status. Specifically, for example, the AfD does not consider German citizens with a migration history from predominantly Muslim countries to be equal members of the German people as defined ethnically by the party. Okay, well,
But that's an opinion.
exactly. So, and okay, they can argue with that. You don't like that. You can present your argument and make a case why they should be regarded as equal members. But they're just these are just people within the party. They don't use. They haven't done any of the things that you claim. They haven't discriminated against anybody. That's what their belief is. So this is really about people's ideas. This is why it's so chilling that it's all about what people are thinking. You are basically saying we are going to engage in surveillance, spying against them with a view ultimately to banning them because we don't like what they're thinking. That's where you're getting into quite serious issues. And that's the Ursula von der Leyen pre-bunking. We're doing pre-bunking. In other words,
Well, it's
we're suppressing
also,
speech before it happens.
but it's also an admission of governance failure for decades. Because, well, why do people think this? How did they come to these conclusions
Right,
if these conclusions are in fact true?
right,
No, it's because of your poor your disastrous
right,
governance.
right,
Okay, and not just one party, the entire establishment.
right,
I mean, the AfD is an outside force. Okay, it seems quite organic to
right,
me. All right, and everyone. I mean, just kind of step back, everyone. Think of like the Tories and Labor in the UK.
Right.
Think of Republicans and Democrats in the United States. There aren't lunatics in all of those parties.
Well, there
They're
are.
all over the
Right.
place.
Right.
Actually, if you talk long enough to most politicians, you can realize
They're
they're
insane. No,
not very smart. They're on the take. They
yes.
don't have any real values
Right.
whatsoever. I
Right.
mean, yes, are there individual members in the AfD that say things that probably would offend me? Yeah, they do. Yeah, but politicians do that all across the board,
Politicians do that, and
everywhere, all the time.
right, and this the idea that somehow nationhood, particularly in Europe, is tied together with Christianity. That's a perfectly legitimate argument. You can disagree with it, but you can say, yeah, they could easily make an argument. German national identity is irrevocably connected with Christianity. There wouldn't be a Germany without Christianity, and
French
yeah,
French identity is inseparable from
right.
Christianity.
That's right. Yeah,
Italian identity,
right,
or the many identities of Italy, let's put it
right,
that way, also,
right. Exactly.
you can't separate it from the tradition and
Right.
rights of Christianity.
That's right. Exactly.
So why
Uh,
is Germany different?
it's not exactly. So this is your best. This is your argument, and you think, well, this is an idiotic argument. And so this exclusionary understanding,
Understanding.
imagine this is exclusionary. This is the German FBI talking. Why am I listening to the German FBI? Exclusionary understanding. Who are you to talk about exclusionary understanding? I mean,
Did somebody from the Frankfurt School write this?
exactly, the Frankfurt School.
No, I mean, I've said a thousand times, I'm fascinated with the Frankfurt School, okay? But they didn't have power.
Exactly. Imagine that's right. You'd have Adorno or
Yeah,
Marcuse sitting there writing this. They probably would come up with something like this.
exactly. That's why it came into my mind.
This
This is German. What is it? Is this a legal statement or German metaphysics?
is German metaphysics. It's a German metaphysics masquerading as a legal statement. So this exclusionary understanding of the people is the starting point and ideological basis for ongoing agitation against certain individuals or groups of people through which they are defamed and despised indiscriminately, and irrational fears and rejection are stirred up.
Okay, I'm looking for a footnote here.
Yeah,
An
exactly. Yeah,
example,
exactly.
please.
Yes, footnote.
There's
Exactly.
there's a lot of claims being made
That's
here.
right. Yeah, exactly. Can you tell us where is this? Who did this?
Uh,
This is
Besmirching someone's character because they carry a knife and they stab people.
That's right. Exactly.
You can't say a bad thing about
Well,
someone that does
that's
something
exactly
like
what
that.
that's exactly what they're saying is that when they do make these precisely this claim, hey, this open door policy means that essentially women can't go out in the evenings anymore. Thank you, Angela Merkel. That's exactly what happens in political debate. Political debate. Yeah, you've allowed so many people to come in, and now Germans are no longer feel safe in their own towns. What do you want politicians to say? They're supposed to
Yeah.
be
What about their understanding of
right.
safety?
Yeah. And so this is irrational fears. Irrational fears. Apparently it's an irrational fear that somebody might stab you and your children. And that's an irrational fears. You're apparently just supposed to keep quiet about this, never bring it to anyone's attention. And when these stabbings happen, then you're supposed to say, this is mysterious. We don't know what the motive of the stabber was. And the worst thing is if this fuels Islamophobia. Not the worst thing is that, hey, 3 innocent people are dead, but it might lead to
Yeah,
Islamophobia.
it's very interesting. There's great hesitation to impugn motives to people that stab women and rape women and kill
Right,
little children.
right.
But there's no hesitation. There's no inhibition to characterize someone that supports the AfD.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. Yes. No, that never is any hesitation. Um, this is evident in the numerous anti-xenophobic, anti-minority. I think they mean xenophobic rather than anti-xenophobic. So they mean this is evident in the numerous xenophobic, anti-minority, anti-Islamic, and anti-Muslim statements continually made by local party officials. So in other words, that's basically anyone complaining about mass immigration, the rise in violent crimes, that people are not safe, you can just simply characterize it all as xenophobic, anti-minority, anti-Islamic, and anti-Muslim. And so in other words, shut up about it and don't ever raise that issue.
Okay, is uncomfortable as reality is, but being xenophobic, being anti-minority, anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim, that's political speech, George.
That's right. That is political speech.
It's political speech.
That's it. It's political speech. And this is political speech that is inevitable in the face of violent crime. People feel very strongly about it. I mean, that's what, all these politicians will rail about it. We need to put, as Keir Starmer, let's shove people into prison. This affects people at a visceral level when, there's violent crime. Children are stabbed to death. And then they say, well, who did the stabbing? Well, this is somebody who shouldn't even be in the country. Yeah, the people are going to feel very strongly about it. And instead of that, instead of understanding why people feel strongly about it, you start attacking their motives and say that they're just completely morally reprehensible creatures who should be outlawed.
Yeah, but who's held to account for letting these people
exactly.
in? Exactly.
That's right. That's right. Letting them in, and basically, and like this Friedrich Merz, who campaigned on actually closing the border. First thing he did after winning elections said, well, no one's closing any borders. I'm not going to do any of that. I mean, I know I said it during the campaign, but I don't mean to do anything about it, which is kind of why his numbers have tanked.
I guess earlier today, I asked you and Mark, does it apply under Trump after 100 days? Every time we vote, we end up getting John McCain.
Right.
I think we can abbreviate that for the German case. So every time you vote, you end up getting Angela Merkel.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly. Whoever it is, whether it's Merkel, Scholz, now Merz, it's the same thing. You promise, oh yeah, absolutely, we're going to close the border. No, we're not going to have any more of these open borders. And then no, as soon as the election is over, no, of course we're going to keep the borders open. I just said it in order to win an election. I mean, of course, what do you expect me to do?
When the presumptive chancellor says such a thing, making a reversal after the election, it's no. We should not be surprised that people in the AfD say, "But what about your campaign promise?" And that angers people even more.
Right. That's right.
And that's why this is coming down.
That's right. And that's the reason why, well, ultimately, I don't have an answer to these questions. So why don't we just simply stop anyone asking these questions? Why, if we could just prevent the AfD going to the microphone and demanding from the authorities, why aren't you closing the borders? We'll just simply outlaw the AfD. I mean, that's a much easier way to solve the problem.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. But the stabbings and the murders and the rapes that's not going to change.
No, that's not going to
get rid of a political party. That's
right, exactly. So no one
change that reality.
That's right. And then we can control the message by saying we just don't know what the motive here is. It's one of those things. It's a kind of a mystery. Or better still, as happens in the United States, is they rule out right away, this is definitely not a terrorist incident. Absolutely not. No, this is not a terrorist incident, when it's quite obvious that it is a terrorist incident.
Yeah, but if an ethnic German had done such a thing, it would be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Then boom, then everybody, this is the sort of the right wing, the German right wing is on the march. In particular, the ongoing agitation against refugees and migrants promotes the spread and deepening of prejudices, resentment, and fears towards this group of people. The devaluation of the aforementioned groups of people is also evident in the blanket use of terms such as knife migrants, or in the general attribution of an ethno-culturally determined propensity towards violence by leading members of the AfD. General
Well, I mean, I'm sure that there are crime statistics being presented
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
media. But
I think
I'm sure they're in there somewhere.
that's
I'm
right.
still recovering from my eye operation, but I'm still waiting for, well, what do the statistics tell us? Your
Exactly.
own state generated
That's right.
statistics.
Exactly. Exactly. The statistics are quite stark. I mean, when I've looked at the statistics and saying, where the crimes are taking place, they're quite stark. Germans are generally quite law-abiding. I mean, it's a fairly low level of crime. I mean, this is where most of the crimes are, in the migrant areas, which is kind of why people in Germany are quite agitated about it. But again, you notice how deepening of prejudices, resentment, and fears towards. Again, this is sociology. This is nothing to do with any kind of, you know, legal findings. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I guess because this is a translation from German, and German sentences tend to be horrifically long.
that they're long, yes, and full of
And so
vagueness.
I
Yeah.
feel like I'm reading a translation of Max Weber here.
That's right. That's a very good point because with German, it's not only the sentences are long, but things that sound good in German, which because they sound as if they're full with meaning, when you translate in English, they just sound like empty pomposities. So in German, it sounds a lot better. It sounds like this word really means something. When you translate that word into English, you think, hey, that's just because you don't talk like that in English. So just think this is just a pompous, verbose way of speaking.
Verbose.
And I remember that also again reading Germans, and you think, oh, this is really good. Reading the German, and then you read the translation. Wow, God, imagine anyone writing like that in English. He'd be, laughed out. Hey, what the heck does any of that mean? Um, and then here, and this is the vice president and of the two vice president of the this Bundesamt say this is their words, issue a joint statement. Says, we have come to the conclusion that the alternative for Germany is a confirmed right-wing extremist endeavor. This finding is based on an extremely careful expert review. When, whenever somebody tells me that something is extremely careful, it means it's not careful in the slightest. Expert, the expert,
Well, see, this is what's called special pleading,
right,
everyone.
right, yeah, yeah. These experts, like you're getting some political
Well,
scientists, social
yeah, but
scientists.
also because again, George pointed out with the translation here, expert, one person. You can. It's open to interpretation.
Well,
Okay.
of course it is. But look, anywhere at all, you can find anywhere any number of social scientists who will tell you what you want them to tell you. You'll say, find me 10 social scientists who will tell us that the AfD poses a threat to democracy and the AfD is just simply a continuation of Hitler by other means. And here are my 10 social scientists, my 10 experts. And so this is the careful review by experts. Um, this finding is based extremely spanning a period of approximately 3 years.
Oh, very thorough. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very thorough. We considered numerous statements and positions from high-ranking party representatives from across Germany and also incorporated the latest organizational developments into the report. Decisive for our assessment is the AfD's ethnic-based understanding of the people. That was decisive. You would have thought decisive was, there are all of these eight AfD people who were involved in acts of violence, and they were in, there was all these incidents, violent incidents that the AfD was involved in. And then you think, okay, well, now you've made a case, but now it's the ethnic-based understanding.
Well, so
That's the basis of your claim.
so a fundamental question obviously comes to mind. Who decides what a people's ethnic understanding
Yeah,
of themselves are?
and that,
That does. How do you did? I mean, they're making this claim that
right.
there is an
Right.
ethnic-based understanding
Or
of
that, or
the.
that the AfD argues for an ethnic-based understanding. But, like,
But that's your
that's
interpretation
your
of.
interpretation. That's your interpretation. And, if you subscribe to some other idea, that's fine. You can subscribe to some other idea. That's your opinion. You're entitled to argue your opinion as to what your understanding of what Germany is or the German nation is. That's fine. That doesn't mean that it has some sort of validity in law for your understanding of what it means to be a German.
You
Uh,
can do this all through the world. What is the understanding of your ethnicity? I mean, it just it can
it's
be.
something. Yeah, it's open to argument. That absolutely is something that people argue about. Um, in any country, country in America, they argue about in Britain anyway. Well, what actually does it mean to be an American?
That is as long as old as the
Right.
Republic.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, an ethnic base which devalues entire population group. They devalue. What does devalue mean? I mean, we devalue a lot of people. That's what we do. We devalue them. Devalues entire population groups in Germany and violates their human dignity.
What
How
is
you mean what they write is violating somebody else's human dignity?
You can disagree with it.
Right. How's it violating anyone's human dignity? This understanding of the people is reflected in the party's overall anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim stance. So when you
Well,
read all this, you say, well, all of this is basically it sounds like a political statement. This has nothing to do with the law. This has nothing to do with any threats to the security of the country. This is a political statement written by people who are members of the Social Democrats or the Greens, who just got hammered in the election and want to remove a rival political party. There's nothing here that I can say, well, this is, there's a legal understanding here. This is just political propaganda.
yeah, I don't see that it's pretty pathetic, George, if this is their autopsy of the election outcome.
Yeah,
This is what it is. This is their autopsy.
right.
We cannot go argument to argument with these people, so
That's
we're going to ban them.
that's right. That's right. And it's a very strange thing in Germany. I mean, the Social Democrats who just got absolutely hammered in the election, and they're in the government. How does that come about? That you just lost. You were overwhelmingly rejected by the public. Worst performance throughout your history, and somehow you continue to be in the government, almost like nothing has happened. I mean, you're still there. This clearly something very deeply is wrong in Germany. I mean, the minimum
Well,
is that when you get rejected by the voters, you're out of office. You don't just continue as if nothing has happened.
and what do you think the reaction is going to be? Do you want the AfD to be an underground society?
Right.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why what was who was that fraudster, the guy that made up his entire
Oh,
background?
George. Oh God, I was going to say George Kaplan, but that's not George Kaplan. It's George.
Okay, everybody knows who we're talking
Right,
about.
exactly. He
And
just sent to prison.
it's like, oh, he has to be thrown out of Congress. We have
Right,
to
right, yeah, yeah.
discipline. Well, George and I came down onto let the voters decide.
But yeah, but
Okay.
he never got the chance, and yeah,
No, but
he
my point
sure.
is that instead of this top-down bad sociology, bad propaganda, why don't you consider, well, if you think these people are anti-immigrant
Right,
and you think that they're anti-Muslim, well, why is that the case?
right,
Can we just is that
right,
can we discuss that?
right, right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is that the case here?
That's right. That's right. And what do you think was going to happen if you just simply throw open your doors and people arrive by the millions from very, very different cultures
Well,
in Germany?
is it imprudent to ask the following questions. Immigration to the United States, this is very well documented. They wanted to go to America and become Americans.
Right.
They wanted to be part of something that they'd heard about. And as hard as, Upton Sinclair and the octopus and all of these horror stories, and they're great literature, okay? But it was a step above where they came from, okay?
Right.
And now they're the solid pillars of the middle class in America. Who am I talking about? Eastern European Jews, Italians, Poles, okay? Irish.
Right.
These are the
Right.
pillars of American society,
Right.
okay?
Right. But I
But
think
but,
that's
but I
quite
mean, when Angela Merkel opens the gate
right.
to people like, I want to go become a German. No, I want to go to Germany. They're
Where
different.
I can make some money. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And in the case of America as well, hey, America in the 1920s imposed the harshest uh, anti-immigration laws. I mean, that's the part that's always forgotten. That for 40 years, from the 1920s to the 1960s, nobody got into the United States. Just it was that was they said, hey, we've got enough here. We don't want any more immigrants. So it's not like everybody just said, "Hey, come on in." The more the merrier. That wasn't the idea of America. But you're right. The case of Germany, and it's particularly problematic there, is that everyone heads towards Germany because hey, that's where they think they can make some money, and they have quite a generous welfare system. So it's not that hard that when you arrive to sign on to some kind of welfare payments. So there's obviously the economic incentive for people to go there. The problem is that the Germans themselves are not very enthusiastic about it, and naturally they are expressing their dissatisfaction in their vote. And the political establishment has decided that, well, the way we're going to deal with this is first, we're going to keep them out of power. That doesn't seem to be working. They're continuing to rise in popularity. Well, we're just going to ban them. I mean,
Well, I mean,
that's an
but
easy way
George,
to solve it.
I mean, when you look at this 30,000 feet in the air, so people are being politically disillusioned with the establishment because of establishment policies when it comes to immigration. So let's disband the party.
Right,
Oh, there's no discussion of meeting people
right,
where they are.
right,
Okay, it's like, okay,
right.
you're dissatisfied with
That's
this.
right.
Let's see if we can resolve it
That's
amicably through the democratic process, through the
right,
state we have created. No,
right,
let's just ban it. Okay.
right. Let me just show the what what was said by uh, by Marco Rubio. So here, Rubio issued this statement. Germany just gave its spy agency new powers to surveil the opposition. That's not democracy, it's tyranny in disguise. What is truly extremist is not the popular AfD, which took second in the recent election, but rather the establishment's deadly open border immigration policy that the AfD opposes. Germany should reverse course. So this is a good, strong statement from Marco Rubio. You said we don't often quote Marco Rubio, but this has said it. And then this is how the German Foreign Ministry responded to this tweet. It says, German Foreign Office says, this is democracy. This decision is the result of a thorough and independent investigation to protect our constitution. How is it independent? It's from within the German government. This is the German government investigating the opposition. So it's independent. How's it independent?
Yeah,
To,
but this party it was made clear from the get-go that they're going to be gated off. They're not going to
right,
have any power. They're
right.
being completely ignored. So how is it, where's the threat to the Constitution and the rule of law? They have no power.
That's right. That's exactly. To protect our constitution and the rule of law, it is independent courts that will have the final say. Why? Why would the courts have the final say? I mean, simply the voters are supposed to have the final say. The people are supposed to have the final say. The courts don't get to decide who is and who is not allowed to speak, or who is and who is not allowed to run
A
for
court
office.
decides who is and is not a German?
That's exactly. And then we have learned from our history that right-wing extremism needs to be stopped.
Well,
So
you're
that's
learning
it.
the wrong lesson, learning the
We're the
wrong.
wrong way. So that's it. So you're basically saying we are going to stop this political party, the most popular party right now, because we learned something from our history, and so we're just going to stop it. There may be, riding high in the polls. We're just going to stop it.
Yeah, well, von der Leyen, she's not original. In the 19th century, they probably didn't use exactly the same words, but
Right.
it meant we have the tools. We
Yes.
certainly saw Germany
Right.
in the early part of the 20th century. We have the
We
tools,
have the
okay?
tools.
And now
That's
we
right.
have the tools again,
But
okay?
we have the tools, and that's without question. That's how Ursula von der Leyen sees it. This is, and that's a very interesting case because Ursula von der Leyen is a very unpopular politician. She's failed at everything she's did in Germany, but somebody was pushing her. She comes from money. Merkel pushed her, so she got to be president of the European Commission for no other reason than that Merkel pushed her. And now she believes in cracking down on everybody else, people who actually are popular, unlike she is. And so she, in a way, embodies the ethos of the contemporary Europe, a political establishment deeply unpopular, but with a strong sense of entitlement. And this sense of entitlement fuels its desire to crack down on all speech and activity that it poses any kind of threat to its rule.
Yes. Debate is appeasement.
Exactly. So that there's I do find this interesting that the German Foreign Office responded in this way to the American Secretary of State. That's quite an aggressive response. We're not used to Germany responding this way to Americans, and they more and more you're getting a feeling that the Germans are distancing themselves from, well, at the very least, from the Trump administration. Remember with J.D. Vance, who made that speech in Munich, and he pointed out to what was being done to the Alternative for Deutschland. And again, the Germans came back very, very aggressively, against J.D. Vance. Now they're coming back against Rubio. I don't know where Germany's going, but I don't think it's going into a good place.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you're ideologically possessed. You lose touch with reality.
Right,
Okay. You lose touch with geopolitics. You lose touch with where people are. You have to go to where people are to
right,
understand them. They refuse to, will not deign to get into the trenches and talk to these
right,
people. Okay.
right.
One thing that, they should be very careful about, George, is that you have polities all across Europe that are furious,
Yes,
not dissatisfied, not unhappy.
right,
They're furious.
yep,
And because these people are so detached,
right,
because what rules them is not facts on the ground,
right,
but an ideology, it's an understanding of.
right,
Well, what the hell is that supposed to
right.
mean?
Yeah, no, that's right. One should say that there's a pattern here in Europe. We had a few weeks ago, we talked about this. Marine Le Pen being ordered by the courts on an absolutely ridiculous made-up case. She was using EU funds for
Oh, that never happens.
domestic
Never,
politics or
never
whatever.
happens. Never happens.
Exactly. So basically, well, that's it. You can't run in the next presidential election. Leading in the polls, just like AfD, you're leading in the polls. Oh, well, that's it. You can't run in the presidential election. Too bad. Decided by the courts, the France's courts. Then we had Romania.
And they have the nerve to criticize Donald Trump.
That's right, exactly.
They have the nerve to do. I mean, there's plenty of reason to criticize Donald Trump, but I
Right.
mean, are you going to take the high ground on this? Really?
That's And then of course we had Romania, the bizarre election in Romania, where the winner of the first round of the presidential election, Călin Georgescu, he won, was on the brink of winning the second round very comfortably, and then the election was cancelled. No real explanation of it. Oh, TikTok, there was some sort of a campaign on TikTok.
Oh
What
yeah.
does any of that got to do with the fact that he won an election?
It's really interesting, George, because they're doing a redo, as they like to say. And I this morning I did because I always get up so early. I just did a real cursory, like Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. I just really quickly, and all of them imply it was substantiated that there
Right,
was Russian
right,
meddling in the
right.
election,
Exactly.
which there's no evidence of it whatsoever.
No,
The Romanians themselves have said that.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
But every single one in the first or second paragraph, it's
right.
just taken as a given.
That's right. The classic case of that was when the president of Romania said, well, there really isn't any evidence that Russia interfered on Georgescu's part, but that only shows how crafty the Russians are, that they removed all evidence of their interference. So it was that's it. That's in other words, the very fact that there's no evidence is proof that the Russians were behind this. This is I mean, what was what was the name of the defense secretary, Donald Rumsfeld? You remember, like, evidence of absence is not absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So just because there's no evidence that Saddam ever had weapons of mass destruction, that doesn't mean that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. So it's
The known
wonderful.
knowns and the known unknowns.
Exactly. That's it. So in other words, the less evidence there is, the more crafty he was in order to remove all of the
Well,
evidence.
actually, there is an inverse relationship. The more inept you are when you go down that path, okay? It's
Exactly.
just the stratosphere of ineptitude,
That's
okay?
right.
Now that's your only that's your fallback position. It's your
That's right.
fallback position, okay?
And the funny thing was that Georgescu, okay, so okay, we're going to do the redo. And then Georgescu said, "Yeah, I think I put my name into the hat, And of course, he was ahead in the polls, and then they're going to redo it, and he would win the election very, very comfortably, probably on the first round, not even no need for two rounds. And lo and behold, they arrested him and said, "No, you can't run." And so
Yeah,
he's
but I thought
prevented
it
from
was
running.
Russian meddling. He didn't
Yes.
meddle. The Russians. So why are you arresting this man?
That's exactly.
I
That's
mean,
right.
the claim was that he was involved in Russian meddling. No.
That's right.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
you arrest a man that you have no evidence was involved in this whatsoever, but you arrest him anyway.
That's right. Exactly. That's it. So they prevented him from running. So they're redoing it, and then so they're now getting a kind of a Georgescu light in his place, who's likely to win. But we don't really know much about him. I mean, I have my doubts whether he's really is going to be a Georgescu light. That I think that may just be his method of trying to win by
Yeah,
saying, "Yeah,
well,
I'm another
I
Georgescu."
hear an echo of Maloney coming here.
Exactly. That's what I'm hearing. I think I might appoint Georgescu as my prime minister. He's not going to do it. I'm getting a sense he's just somebody who's he knows the talk. He's got to
Well,
sound
and
like
particularly,
Georgescu.
I'm sorry, no disrespect to Romanians here, but I mean, if you make it to the presidency in Romania, your next shot is Brussels.
Yes.
Okay, that's where you want to go.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. That's right. And because that's where you want to go, they're going to apply quite a lot of pressure on him. Yeah, okay, you ran in the election, you pretended to be a nationalist, and oh yeah, Romania, Romanian history. I have my doubts about Ukraine. Now the election is over. Forget everything that you just said. Okay, done. And then you'll have a nice cushy job down the road in
You
Brussels.
know, to put a bow on this, George. I mean, everybody, this is really very, very serious business because we talked to a German scholar, and I was making the argument: the more you worry about January 1933 and
Yeah.
connecting dots that don't exist, the more you're going to create January 1933. Obviously, I'm talking about the appointment of Adolf Hitler to be
Right.
chancellor. He didn't win the election,
Right.
everybody. He was appointed.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Nazi polling was on the decrease
Yeah.
when he was
Decrease.
appointed. Okay.
Yeah.
But see, because you take this narrative and you reify it. Okay.
Right.
It's an interpretation, everyone. This is what history is all. It's not, I'm going to pick up history and hand it over to George.
Right.
Okay. And this is what they're doing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And this is extremely dangerous.
Yep.
And it sets a precedent. I
Right.
mean, what? We don't like this guy. Lock him up. These people, deny them their voting
Right.
rights.
Right.
It's a slippery slope.
Right.
And you can go down really fast.
No, I think it's very interesting because it's like you either have the Hitler thing, so bring up Hitler, or you have the Stalin thing. So in other words, well, we need to whip up fear of Russia, that somehow Russia is everywhere, threatening us everywhere, wherever we turn, there's Russia. So it's like Europe is like caught in this strange time warp
Yeah.
where this forever Hitler and Stalin.
Yeah.
I remember in the 1990s when the whole Yugoslavia thing came up, it was Hitler and Stalin, Madeleine Albright, that's all she could ever talk about. Oh, Hitler, Stalin, Yugoslavia. Milosevic is either Hitler or Stalin. And then, 30 years on, it's still the same thing. And that's why, you get really do get a sense that, Europe is just a backwater. I mean, you just simply, you're unable to think of any new terms of reference other than going back to Hitler and Stalin.
But that is the best indication in my mind. It is the death of politics. Okay, we have a death of politics because you have limited points of reference, and as time passes, George, and something you and I are acutely aware of, as time passes, you get a more simplified. Everything is more simplified, simplified. And there's no more nuance involved, and it shows. And this is again. The outcome of a political class of people that just feel that they are privileged. Okay, their privilege is far more important than facts on the ground and politics itself. Politics is the art of the possible. I wish I had invented that, but I didn't. But it's very true. These people don't want to do that. They don't want to go down this path.
No.
If there are grievances, you have to go where people are. Why are you aggrieved?
Right.
That's what politics is supposed to be about. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
No, I think that's exactly right. That's all they can say against the AfD. That's all they can say against Donald Trump. That's all they can say against Marine Le Pen. Oh, Hitler. And then and then on the other side, when you get all the Kaya Kallases and others, they don't really, Hitler isn't the big thing for them. It's the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is what happened in 1945, the Soviet Union. So that's their point of reference. In Eastern Europe, and it just becomes a completely idiotic, and therefore they fail to understand anything that is going on. They fail to understand the war in Ukraine, and they fail to understand political developments in Europe, because you're trying to fit it into a kind of a prism that is totally inappropriate.
Yeah, it's trying to what is it? To put a circle in a
the square peg in a round hole.
Yes, that's it. That's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. Very, very dangerous times. Again, I don't want to get, besmirch little countries. I mean, if this was going on in Montenegro, it'd be unfortunate.
Right.
Okay. It would still be wrong.
Right.
But this is happening in Germany. Okay.
Right.
How many more magnitudes of importance do we have right here?
Right.
And it can be easily used. Well, we do know this. What we saw with Romania, we had, what was his name? You mentioned him earlier today. No. As a reaction to that, we can do this for the AfD. Who said that?
Thierry Breton.
Thierry Breton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
when George and I made a whole podcast on that,
that's
saying,
right. Thierry Breton.
Yeah, they're going to do it. We said it. They will do it.
That's right. That's right. And that's what is chilling because, yeah, it could be Germany, but let's say let's say they're outlawing some small party. Well, this small party, 2% of the vote, but I think we'll outlaw it because, we think it has Nazi roots. You're outlawing currently the most popular party. You are really attacking the very foundations of democracy. You're going after the most popular party because you don't like its views. The fact that it's a threat to your privileges, it's a threat to your rule, and so you cobble together some meaningless set of words that doesn't mean anything, and you're using that to justify suppression of democracy. That's about as chilling as you can get.
Yeah, well, affront to the AfD is an affront to some people's human dignity, but this move by the German government is an affront to my dignity.
Right.
What about my dignity?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't count?
No, no. So that's again, yeah. The people who have voted. Remember, not only they quarter of the votes in the last, about 20% of the votes in the election. They got about a quarter in according to the polls, but they also won 2 state elections. We talked about that. They won two state elections last year. They came in first in 2 state elections in East Germany, or what was East Germany. That's a serious political party. This isn't just some fringe thing. And your only resort is to start banning. That's and you're doing it in the name of democracy. We're protecting democracy. No, you are not protecting democracy. This is the worst kind of thing, worst kind of arrogance when you crush democracy in the name of protecting democracy.
Yeah, and the German Foreign Ministry's reply to Rubio, they should be embarrassed by that,
They
but they're
should be
not.
embarrassed by that.
But they're not.
That's exactly.
They're not. They're not embarrassed by it.
Right.
We have to destroy democracy to save democracy.
Exactly. We need to destroy.
My goodness, aren't you so clever?
That's right. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, George, democracy is just a nuisance for these people.
Yeah.
We know that. I mean, we've known that for a long time. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And now they're just taking the mask off.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
The people failed. We have to elect a new people. Correct. Okay.
That's right.
That's exactly what's happened.
That's right.
And there's nothing good. There's nothing good that's going to come of this.
That's right. Exactly.
All righty. Our very explosive podcast is about to be recorded. All right. Anyway, this is our Sunday wrap. This is first of 2. George and I will reconvene with God's help. We'll throw in a rosary and we'll do a live stream tomorrow.
Or 10 a.m. Eastern time.
And then George goes solo on Tuesday.
3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join us tomorrow. Come with as many questions and ideas and suggestions as possible. We always like answering them. And then they've got to deal with this tip jar situation because these wild dogs are getting really angry. And when they get angry, they get really ferocious. Whoa. It's like I mean, it's Apple is the enforcer. He has this kind of energy.
Everybody, there are 4 beds for these dogs in this room alone. Okay, in this room alone, there are 4 beds for dogs.
Yeah, that's very nice. So anyway, we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and above all, we're going to be able to just calm these dogs down one day, maybe, perhaps. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.